I paid my fare. I am sitting in this seat, and I am not moving.
Girl, I said get up. You are in violation of the city code.
No, sir. It is my constitutional right to sit here. You are the one in violation. I knew what I was doing. I knew what it would cost me. I was 15 years old.
Welcome back to After Hours. I am Vaughn. Everybody knows the name Rosa Parks. December 1st, 1955. Montgomery, Alabama. She refused to give up her seat on the bus. And that moment changed America. But 9 months before Rosa Parks, a 15-year-old girl did the same thing on the same bus system, in the same city. She was arrested, dragged off the bus, handcuffed, and thrown in jail. The civil rights leaders in Montgomery knew about her. They had been looking for a test case to challenge the bus segregation laws. This girl was the first one brave enough to do it. And then they decided not to use her. Her name was Claudette Colvin. She was 15, she was dark-skinned, she was pregnant, and the movement decided she was not the right face for their cause. This is Episode 5, The Girl Before Rosa. Montgomery, Alabama. March 2nd, 1955, 9 months before Rosa Parks. Claudette Colvin was a sophomore at Booker T. Washington High School. She was a straight-A student. She had been studying Black history in school, learning about Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth. She was 15 years old and she was angry. On that day, Claudette boarded the Highland Gardens bus after school. She sat in the middle section, where black passengers were allowed to sit as long as no white passenger needed the seat. When the bus filled up, the driver ordered Claudette and 3 other black passengers to move so a white woman could sit down. 3 of them stood up. Claudette did not.
It felt like Harriet Tubman's hands were pushing me down on one shoulder, and Sojourner Truth's hands were pushing me down on the other.
I told you to get up.
I paid my fare. It is my constitutional right.
The driver stopped the bus and called the police. 2 officers boarded. They grabbed Claudette by both wrists and dragged her from her seat. She was crying. She was terrified. But she did not stand up on her own. They handcuffed her, forced her into the back of a patrol car, and took her to the city jail. She was charged with violating the city segregation law, disturbing the peace, and assaulting a police officer. She was 15 years old.
They called my mother and told her I was in jail. My mother came to get me, and she was shaking. She was shaking because she thought they were going to kill me.
The NAACP in Montgomery had been looking for a test case. They wanted to challenge the bus segregation laws in court. They needed a plaintiff, someone who had been arrested for refusing to give up their seat, someone whose case could be taken all the way to the Supreme Court. Claudette Colvin should have been that person. She was the first. She had the courage. She had the conviction. But the civil rights leaders looked at Claudette and saw problems. She was 15. They wanted an adult. She was dark-skinned. They wanted someone who would appeal to a broader audience. She came from a working-class family on the poorer side of town. They wanted someone more respectable, more polished, someone the white press would take seriously.
She is brave, there is no question about that. But we need someone the whole city can rally behind. We need someone who looks right.
Looks right?
You know what I mean. The press will tear this girl apart. Her age, her background, her complexion. We need someone they cannot dismiss.
And then Claudette became pregnant. She was an unmarried teenager. In 1955, in the Deep South, in a movement that needed public sympathy, that was the end of the conversation. The NAACP chose Rosa Parks. Rosa was 42 years old. She was light-skinned. She was married. She was the secretary of the local NAACP chapter. She was, by every measure the movement's leaders valued, more acceptable. But Claudette Colvin's story was not over. Even though she was not chosen as the face of the Montgomery bus boycott, She became one of the key plaintiffs in a different case, one that most people have never heard of. Browder versus Gale, filed in February 1956. 4 black women from Montgomery challenged the constitutionality of the city's bus segregation laws in federal court. Claudette Colvin was one of them. She was 16 years old. On June 5, 1956, a 3-judge federal panel ruled that Montgomery's bus segregation laws were unconstitutional. The case went to the Supreme Court. On November 13, 1956, the Supreme Court affirmed the ruling. It was Browder versus Gale, not Rosa Parks' arrest, that legally ended bus segregation in Montgomery. And Claudette Colvin's testimony was central to that victory.
I told the court what happened to me on that bus. I told them how they grabbed my wrists and dragged me out of my seat. I told them I was 15 years old, and they treated me like a criminal for sitting down.
But the headlines did not mention Claudette. The history books did not mention Claudette. The story of the civil rights movement was being written in real time, and the authors chose Rosa Parks as the protagonist. Rosa Parks became an icon. Her name appeared in every textbook, every documentary, every speech about the civil rights movement. She deserved the recognition. What she did took extraordinary courage. But Claudette Colvin was erased. After the Supreme Court ruling, Claudette moved to New York City. She worked as a nurse's aide in a nursing home in the Bronx. For decades, almost no one knew her name. She raised her son alone. She lived quietly. She did not seek attention. She told an interviewer years later that in Montgomery, people would not hire her because of her arrest record. She could not get a job. She could not escape the stigma of being an unwed teenage mother in 1950s Alabama. The movement she helped launch did not help her afterward.
They did not want to acknowledge what I did. Young people think Rosa Parks just sat down on a bus one day, and it just happened. They do not know that there were other people who did the same thing.
It was not until 2009, more than 50 years later, that Claudette Colvin's story began to reach a wider audience. A book called Claudette Colvin, Twice Toward Justice brought her story to the public. She was finally recognized. In 2021, at the age of 82, Claudette Colvin had her juvenile arrest record expunged. 66 years after she was dragged off that bus, the charges were finally dropped. She was 15 years old. She paid her fare. She sat in her seat, and she did not move. 9 months before Rosa Parks. 9 months before the boycott. 9 months before the movement had a name. And then they decided she was not the right face, not the right age, not the right shade, not the right story.